I'm hoping that Borei Olam gives the right words tonight to hit on a few very delicate but very powerful topics. Because at the end of the day, Talmud Torah keneged kulam. And if that's the case, you found the right parasha. Im Bechukotai telechu. Any guy that went through a yeshiva, when it comes parashat Bechukotai, he knows what's coming. He knows good and well what's coming. He knows that the mashgiach is going to get up, the Rosh HaYeshiva is going to get up, and he's going to ring the words of that Rashi until it buzzes and crackles in your bones. Im Bechukotai telechu, shetiyu amelim batora. That's the Rashi we live on. Shahari mipihen anu chaim. And in this incredible concept of not just to learn Torah, but to be amelim batora, to be able to schwitz in learning, to be able to put tremendous toil and work, and to give it all your kochot, to be able to literally be willing to die for another pshat in Taisvis, another pshat in a Rashba, another diuk in a Rashi, another lumdis in a Reb Chaim, another Reb Baruch Ber, another Reb Shimon Shkop, and to be able to live, to want, to learn, to realize that Torah is fire, and it's what changes people for the best. It literally refines us. The way it refines metal, it gets out all the dirt, and it only brings out the purity of a person. Im Bechukotai telechu, shetiyu amelim baTorah. The Torah refines us, it cleans us. It's the fire that's machshir, the pot that went taref. You have a pot that went taref, it has in it bliot. What type of bliot? It has in it bliot of not kosher. It has bliot of taref in that pot. How you machshir the pot? You got to put it in fire. Because when it went in with fire, it has to come out with fire. The Torah is the fire that's machshir the Jew. It's machshir the keli. It takes out all the bliot of tarfut, of taref, and it keeps us as a kosher Jew. Without Torah, especially in this generation, we're lost. We're lost. The Torah is magneo matzle. Amazing. If you take a look at the parasha, after you read the great opener, Im Bechukotai telechu, shetiyu amelim baTorah, the parasha goes on to tell the most magnificent berachot. Wow, you have to hear the berachot. V'natati gishmechem be'itam. You're going to get the rains on time. You're going to have a bountiful crop, a bountiful harvest. You're going to have wealth. You're going to have hatzlacha. Your enemies are not going to touch you. You're going to be able to literally fortify your land. You'll chase them. They won't chase you. 5 of you could chase away thousands of them. I mean, you have to hear. You have to just open up and read. Just read. Take a look at the opening psukim of this week's parasha and look at the unbelievable blessings in berachot ad beli dai. And this is all for who? The Ben Torah, the Mokir Torah, the one that is steiging and learning in Torah, the one that made Torah his life. Kihem chayenu ve'orech yamenu. You know how? You know what? Ubahem nehege milashon yigia amelut. Ubahem nehege yomam valayla. That person has the greatest berachot coming to him. He has not just olam haba. He has olam hazeh. He has olam hazeh as well. He lives a life that's so blessed, so much nahat, so much enjoyment. And as well, he's zochet shnei shulchanot. And if that's the case, we stop just for a moment in these incredible days of Sephirah HaOmer, and we ask ourselves, what happened? What happened to the greatest giants of Torah, who their amelut and their ubahem nehege yomam valayla was ad lashamayim? The greatest giants of Torah learning, the Talmudim of Rabbi Akiva. They had a rebbe. You have to understand, the rebbe that they had, And everybody knows that a good rebbe can literally make or break a Talmud. They had the greatest of all Rabbeim. They had Rabban Shel Yisrael. They had the one that on him, Moshe Rabbeinu, the one that brought Torah down to Klal Yisrael, he said on Rabbi Akiva, Borei Olam, why are you giving the Torah through me? You should have given the Torah through him. Could you imagine such a rebbe? Could you imagine learning in the yeshiva of the greatest of all Rabbanim to live, none other, Rabban Shel Yisrael, Rabbi Akiva. I was just by his kever. I just prayed Vatikin only a week or so ago by the kever Rabbi Akiva. Wow, what a feeling. You say Shema Yisrael, you know Yatsa Nishmato Be'ehad. You know that when you sit and you learn on the kever Rabbi Akiva, you're learning on the kever from the greatest Torah giants in history. That was their Rebbe, the great Rabbi Akiva. So could you imagine the Torah they got? Could you imagine the giants of Torah that these 24,000 students must have been? If there was somebody that was Mekayim the Pasuk of this week's parasha, Im Bechukotai Telecho, Shetiyu Amelim Batorah. It was these 24,000 giants of Talmudim. All they did was steig and learn Torah Yomam Valayla. And instead of getting the greatest of all berachot, the greatest of all blessings, which is the continuation of the psukim in this week's parasha, where mamash they become untouchable, magneo matzle, their oivim fall in front of them, they have bountiful crop, they have ashirut, wealth and happiness. What ended up happening to them? Bidiyuk hafuch. The greatest of the demonstration of Amelut Patora, and instead of getting all the blessings of this week's parasha, they ended up getting wiped out. Isn't the Torah magneo matzle? Doesn't the Torah protect? Isn't the Torah matzil? Not only is Torah matzil, Rabotai, listen to me well. Not only does Torah protect you in this world, the Torah protects you from all the gezerot in Shamayim as well. The Torah is a force field. It's an incredible protection, both from this world and the next, both from the physical and the spiritual. Someone that takes on Torah, he takes on the whole package. He gets a shmira mikol ukol ukol. Unbelievable. Once somebody came to Rabbi and he told him that he's having sarot, and he told him that he has this problem and that problem and this problem and that problem. Rabbi says, listen, to help you with your problems, I'm going to try to help. But one thing I can tell you for sure, your Torah learning must have went down recently. Do you hear that? Because if you were learning the way you were supposed to be learning, if your seder was the way you were holding to the seder, if you were matmid, if you were counting 60 minutes on the hour of learning without the batala, without the distractions, and your seder haTorah was the way it was supposed to be, half of these problems you wouldn't have. So teda lecha. To help you with your issues, I can try to help you. But let's cut to the chase. Let's go straight to the point of the source of your problem. And that is, your learning isn't the way it's supposed to be. That much I can already tell you. Because these things don't happen to somebody that his Torah is the way it should be. It's an unbelievable magne umatzle. It protects a person, saves a person, and in this case, it didn't. So we got to find out why not. We got to extrapolate on a very simple, small-minded level of where we're holding in life, how and why the Torah of these giants did not kick in for them. Magne o matzle did not protect them, did not shower them with all the berachot of what we just said over this week's parasha, and instead, lehefech, they fell in a magefa of 33 days, 24,000. What happened to that Torah? What happened to the promise of Im Bechukotai Telechu Shetiyu Amelim Batora? It's amazing how this parasha is always the last Shabbat of Sfirat HaOmer. And it's not a coincidence. Rabotai, open your hearts. We're going to hit on things tonight with Borei Olam's help, Siyata Dishmaya, to be able to really open the eyes of what is Doresh from a Ben Torah. In Bechukotai, Telecho. What is it, Telecho? Do you know that the Orach Chaim HaKadosh has, I don't know how many pshatim, just on the word Telecho? Countless. Telecho. Tonight I want to touch upon something that I'm hoping you'll be maskim with. I want you to hear this. There's a famous Gemara on the Vav Amud Aleph in Masechet Berachot. And the Gemara over there is talking about the different levels of Hashra'at Shechina. And how many people does it take to bring Shekhinah down at different degrees of intensity? The Gemara tells us, when you have 10 men, a minyan, that come together, says the Gemara, they draw the Shekhinah down. Actually, the Gemara at the end says a bigger chidush, that when it comes to 10 people who are koveya, to come to a shul, to daven with a minyan every day, not only do they draw the Shekhinah down, but the Shekhinah even shows up before they come, an anticipation that these 10 men are going to come together to pray in front of Hashem. The power of 10 brings an enormous intensity of Hashra'at Shekhinah. Says the Gemara, not only 10, but even 3. When 3 people come together and sit in Bedin, 3 Dayanim, they come to judge, the Gemara brings a pasuk that Hashem sits amongst them in judgment. And then the Gemara says, and not only 3, Jack, but also 2. When 2 people sit together, Bechavruta, and they come together to sit and learn Torah together, the Shekhinah comes upon them as well. And what's the pasuk that the Gemara brings? Az nidbiru yir'eh Hashem ish el re'ehu. 2. Ish el re'ehu. And then the pasuk says something amazing. Vayakshev Hashem. Listen to these words. Az nidbiru yir'eh Hashem ish el re'ehu. When these 2 guys come to speak in Torah with Yirat Shamayim, Yir'eh Hashem, Ish El Re'ehu, one man with his Chavruta, then says the pasuk, Vayakshev Hashem. The simple pshat, Hashem listens in to their Torah learning of these 2 Chavruta that's sitting together and learning Torah. It's interesting, Rashi says, on the Vav Amud Aleph in Berachot, Vayakshev Hashem, says Rashi, that Hashem is mantin lahem. Hashem waits for them. He waits for these 2 Chavrutot to sit down to learn. And then, like the other Mefarshim, Vayakshev, he listens as well. And he wants to hear the Torah that comes down to these 2 Chavrutot when they sit together and steig together and learn together in their Torah. They bring a presence of God. They bring a Hashra'at Shekhinah when 2 Chavrutot sit together and learn Torah. If this is the case, immediately we see in the pasuk that when Ish El Re'ehu comes together to learn, it's not just Az Nidbiru, but it's Az Nidbiru Yir'eh Hashem. It's not enough that they're just coming to sit and learn Torah together. It's that they're coming to sit and learn Torah with Yirat Shamayim. It's Limud Torah with Yirat Shamayim. Then Vayakshev Hashem. Then Hashem comes upon him. Then Hashem listens into them, waits for them. Amazing. Because if there's no Yirat Shamayim, I'd like to read to you, says the Gemara on Shabbat. Daf Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph. Listen to this Gemara. The Gemara tells us, says the Gemara, Kol Adam sheyesh bo Torah ve'en bo yirat shamayim. Someone who has Torah in him, he learned, but he doesn't have yirat shamayim. Domeh, you know what he's compared to? Ligizbor shemasru lo maftechot hapnimiyot v'hamaftechot hachitzoniyot lo masru lo. Listen to this. This is a Gemara Mefureshet. Take a look at this. Shabbat Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph. The Gemara says someone that learns Torah but doesn't have Yirat Shamayim, you know what he's like? He's like the guy that they gave him the keys to the treasure house that's inside the castle, but the keys to the front door they didn't give him. Hazaku Baruch. How is he gonna reach it? How is he gonna get in? How is he gonna reach the riches? If you don't have the key to the front door, what are the keys to the inside treasure houses do good for you? And because of that, the Gemara says, you don't just need Torah. You need Torah mirat shamayim. In Bechukotai, telecho. You know what the word telecho means? Not just Bechukotai, the learning of Torah, but telecho, that you're ready with the Torah and its Amelu to walk along with Hashem. Yirat shamayim, telecho. Don't you remember the pasuk of Noach? Et ha'Elohim hithalech Noach, telecho. Telecho means someone that walks with God. Not just a lamdin that walks with God. And it's Torah im Yirat Shamayim. Then, wow, natati gishmechem be'itam. Oh, you're going to get all the berachot and all the hatzlacha and all the wealth and all the fortitude, and your enemies won't be able to touch you if your amelut batorah is with Yirat Shamayim. Because if it's not with Yirat Shamayim, in spite of the fact that you're holding very special keys, but those keys will not do you any good, because the outer door keys you don't have. So what good then would the keys of the inner chamber do for you? Wow. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable, Rabotai. And if this is the case, this is something powerful to really be able to hit on. This is unbelievable, Rabotai. What Yirat Shamayim is required, as we're talking now, of Az Nidberu Yirei Hashem. Not just to talk and learning, not just to learn Torah, but to be able to learn Torah with Yirat Shamayim. That's the Ish El Re'ehu that Vayakshev Hashem, that Hashem comes to listen to. That's the real Amelut Patora with Yirat Shamayim. What does that mean? How do you learn Torah without Yirat Shamayim? I mean, the Torah itself brings Yirat Shamayim. How bechlal do you have Torah without Yirat Shamayim? I want you to hear what I'm about to tell you. This is a bomb. This is a bomb that we shared yesterday in the Balabatim Kolel that we have every morning from 9 to 11:30, and these guys are on fire. You heard about this Kolel from me. We started with 2. We're up to 25 guys. There's no room in this room anymore. They're coming from Bli Ayin Hara. I don't know where they're coming from. But this is an amazing chidush we gave over yesterday. The chidush of the great Reb Chaim Volozhiner, Zechet Tzadik L'Bracha, Talmid Muvhak, of none less than the Vilna Gaon. Says the great Reb Chaim Volozhiner in his Sefer, Ruach Chaim, on Pirkei Avot, Perek Gimel Mishnah Bet. Listen to this. The Mishnah says, Shnaim, she'en benehem divrei Torah, 2 people that come together, but they don't have between them divrei Torah. What are they? Moshav letzim. They're called the Moshav letzim, which is not a good thing at all. It's not a compliment. 2 guys that come together, ve'en benehem divrei Torah. What are they? Moshav letzim. Wow. Says Reb Chaim Volozhiner, what did you think that Mishnah meant? You thought that Mishnah meant 2 guys that come together and they are schmoozing and they're kidding around. And they're like Yeshiva said, they're bottling, right? They're not learning. Says Reb Chaim Volozhiner, that's not the pshat. Oh my gosh, listen to this. Shnaim she'en benehem divrei Torah. Shnaim she'en benehem divrei Torah. These guys are learning, but the learning is not benehem. Each guy is trying to show off to the other guy that I'm a bigger lamdan than you, that I know more than you, that I'm more intelligent than you, that I know how to learn better than you. He's not learning with the guy, he's learning at the guy. And his whole maimid, and his whole everything in the Chavrusa Shaf is only to show the other guy that I'm better than you. That I know what you don't. And that I'm going to beat you in the competition of debate of learning. It looks like a presidential debate, two guys yelling at each other to put the other guy down, to show him he doesn't know what he's talking about, but I do. That's not benehem, divrei Torah. Wow. Says Reb Chaim Volozhiner, Shnayim she'en benehem divrei Torah. That they don't have Torah amongst them together. There isn't any achdut in their learning. Such a Torah has no yirat shamayim. Such a Torah is not the Torah of the Chavrutot of the Gemara that talks about two guys sitting and learning together and the Shekhinah brings down. That's not the pasuk of Az Nidbiru Yir'eh Hashem Ish El Re'ehu. There's no Ish El Re'ehu. There's no Benehem. And if there's no Ish El Re'ehu, Jack, there's no Vayakshev Hashem. Hashem is not listening to that Torah. Hashem does not be mamtin for these guys to learn. Hashem does not listen into these guys learning. Adaraba, says the Mishnah according to Reb Chaim Volozhiner, this is a Moshav Letzim. Fire! Chatan. Fire is fire. Fire. Did you hear this from Chaim Volozhiner? And then he says, listen to this, open your hearts. He says, because the real Torah learning of two Chavrutot, or when two Chavrutot come together with love, like two brothers, they're coming to solve a problem together. They're coming to steig together. They're coming to bring out the better and best in each other. And they're able to really work on a subject together, ki ish echad ubelev echad, enhancing each other's learning. And what are they doing, guys? What are they doing? You want to know what they're doing? They're listening to each other. They're hearing out each other. They're working with each other's svarot in order to be borer, the ochel from the psolet of the sugya, if you know what I mean. To be borer, the ochel from the psolet of the sugya. They're analyzing the sugya together. They're asking kashas, answering each other's questions, complimenting each other on the insights, going at it with the diukim, and working it ki ish echad belev echad. That's ish el re'ehu. Let's get the pasuk. Az nidbiru yir'eh Hashem. Look at the yirat shamayim, the love that they have. Ish el re'ehu. You could see the yirat shamayim on them, on the way they're handling with each other. Ish el re'ehu. Why? Because they're listening to the other guy, what he has to say. And therefore, midah keneged midah, vayakshev Hashem. Because you're ready to listen to the other guy. Because you're ready to hear him out, says Borei Olam, I'm ready to listen to you. Vayakshev Hashem. What a beautiful ending to this pasuk. I'm ready to hear your tefillot. He writes that if someone is able to hear out somebody else in learning and enhance each other and work with each other's learning and they listen to each other, Hashem listens to him. Hashem listens to his tefillot. Hashem listens to his Torah. That's Torah with yirat shamayim. That's in Bechukotai telechu. Torah with a mahalech with Borei Olam. Elohim ithalech Noach telechu. He's walking with Hashem with Torah. It's an ish re'ehu. It's ki ish echad belev echad, just like it was by Har Sinai. The way the Torah was given is the way the Torah was meant to be learned. The Torah was given, Vayichan, Sham Yisrael, Neger Hahar. Vayichan, says Rashi, is a Lashon Yachid. But we're talking about a whole nation of 3 million people. No, Ki Ish Echad Ubelev Echad. They were Achdut. They were all facing the same mountain, with the same heart, with the same interest, with a love of Achdut together. The way Torah was given is the way the Torah was meant to be handled and learnt. Wow. And then, when it's a achdut of ish el re'ehu, it's a Torah of ish el re'ehu, that shows yir'eh Hashem. That's the aznidberu that we're talking about, that the Shekhinah rests on them, like the Gemara tells us, Vayakshev Hashem. You heard out the other guy, you respect him, I'll hear you out, says Borei Olam, and I'll respect you. But if you can't hear the other guy, I can't hear you. That's why the Gemara describes the Talmudim of Rabbi Akiva and their learning as 12,000 zugot. They were nichshal in the zugot. There wasn't the ish el re'eu shelo nahagu kavod ze lazeh. Yeah, they were learning together, but the zugot wasn't a zug. They weren't learning with each other. They were learning at each other. It wasn't an ish el re'ehu, and therefore says Borei Olam, if you can't hear the other guy, I can't hear you. There's no vayakshev Hashem. There's no vayakshev Hashem. I can't hear you because you can't hear him. You're not learning with him. You're not learning with him. You're using him to say over your goods, to try to demonstrate your dominion in this shidduch, in this chavruta shaf, to show that you're better than the other guy, to show off on the other guy. Says Borei Olam, there's no place for me in this chavruta shaf, because that's not the Torah that I'm looking for. That's not in Bechukotai telechu. There's no yirat shamayim with that. Some Amarei Chazal, the Baalei Musar, say a little bit of a different twist, although the same idea. That no, with their Chavruta they were good, but with everybody else they didn't want to hear. Meaning 12,000 zugot. It's just me and my Chavrusa. But everyone else, if you're not on my level of learning, I'm not interested in talking to you. Says Borei Olam, that's it? It's just you and your Chavrusa? Nobody else counts? If you're not willing to be able to learn with someone who's not on your level, if you're not willing to hear the svarot of another person outside you and your havruta, if you don't have that, then there's no vayakshev Hashem. Same idea. The concept of Torah with yirat shamayim. Remember what the Gemara on Shabbat told us, Lamed Aleph. Someone that learns Torah and has no yirat shamayim, it's like he has the keys to the treasure houses on the inside of the castle, but the key to the front door he doesn't have. What good is it? Yeah, you're holding special keys, but it'll do nothing for you. Because how do you get in? How do you get in? And how does the Torah come into you? How does it stick to you? Ona yirat shamayim. This is the chavrutot that our Gemara is talking about. Says the Baalei Musar, this was the makom of Tamidimarabiyaki Akiva. Don't ask from im Bechukotai telechu, because there wasn't a telechu. I wish you can come in one morning to see our kollel in the morning. You want to see the Vart of Reb Chaim Volozhiner? You want to see the concept of Benehem Divrei Torah? You have to see this. Guys from different walks of life. I'm telling you, mamash, you'd walk in, you'd laugh. And yet, 20 some odd guys became a cohesive family. I don't even know how to describe this to you. Mamish, with such a love, one to another. One guy struggling this, everyone jumps in to pick that guy up. One guy misses a day or two, everyone's calling the guy. Wenak, what's going on? Where are you? We can't go on without you. It's a family. It's literally Benehem Divrei Torah. The Torah is Benehem. It's Torah with yirat shamayim. But that's the Hashrat Shechina. Az nidberu yir'eh Hashem. You want to see the yirat shamayim? You know what type of Torah of nidberu is yir'eh Hashem? It's ish el re'ehu. When you have the ish el re'ehu, you have benehem divrei Torah. Then mida keneged mida vayakshev Hashem. Hashem waits for you. Hashem listens to you because you're ready to listen to somebody else. And be ish el re'ehu when it comes to your learning. Learning with yirat shamayim. And don't get me wrong, not for a minute to think that I'm saying that Tamidimarabiyaki Akiva, the yirat shamayim, was bigger than anyone we've ever met in our lives. Don't get me wrong. But somehow or other, on their incredible level, there was something there that the Gemara refers to, Shalom nahagu kavod zeh bazeh. That either it was just them in the chavruta and no one else, and therefore they didn't want to hear out anyone else, and that was chaser in the vayakshev Hashem, or even them in the chavruta like Reb Chaim Volozhiner told us, it wasn't a concept that they were learning together. There was no Beinehem Divrei Torah. They weren't learning with each other. They were learning at each other. And Rabotai, here is something that I want to highlight to you that I think is a wow. Because that very Gemara that I just told you about, that we're doing now in the Kollel in the morning, about the different intensities of the level of Shekhinah that's brought down on the heads of different denominations of people. And we're talking here about two Chavrutot sitting together, learning Torah, with Torah Benehem, as nidbiru yirei Hashem, ish el re'ehu, vayakshev Hashem. The Gemara goes on to say after this something, wow, listen to this, open your hearts. Says the Gemara, that not only two people, but even one person, when he sits down to learn, he has a certain degree of Hashra'at Shekhinah that rests on him when he learns Torah as well. Says the Gemara. You'll look it up. Vav Amud Aleph, Masechet Berachot. So the Gemara turns around and says, wait one second. If one person has a Hashra'at Shekhinah on him when he sits and learns, so what's the chidush to tell me two people? And why do two people need its own pasuk? If one person has Shekhinah presence when he learns, Kal v'chomer, two people have the Shekhinah when they learn. Listen to the answer of the Gemara. This is going to blow your mind. Answers the Gemara. When two people, two Chavrutot, learn Torah together, the Torah that they learn together is Nichtavim B'Sefer HaZichronot. Whereas when one person learns alone, the Torah that he learns is not written in the book of memory, is not written in the Sefer HaZichronot. That's what the Gemara answers. Shh. What does that mean? What does that mean? Two people learn Torah, and their Torah is written in the Sefer HaZichronot. One person not. What's Sefer HaZichronot? And why not? Hare, we know there's a klal that Tosafot brings here on Makom. V'chol ma'asecha b'sefer nichtavin. Everything you do in life is written in a book called the book of your life. In the Kollel in the morning, we spoke extensively about the great zichut of dedicating a Sefer Torah, Leilui Nishmat, someone who passed away. Because when a person passes away, his life is a scroll. It's a book. And in it is written everything he did, good and bad. And when you dedicate the Sefer Torah, Leilui Nishmat, that person, it's a scroll for a scroll. And it does a tremendous aliyah for the book that the person wrote to the book that should have been written. You're supposed to be a walking Sefer Torah. Wow. So wait one second. So if that's the case, even a Yachid that sits down and learns, everything he does in life is written in a Sefer HaZichronot. If that's the case, why does the Gemara say only two people's Torah written in the book of memory, Sefer HaZichronot, but one person learning alone? No, his Torah is not written in the Sefer HaZichronot. Why not? Everything a person does is in a Sefer written his whole life. It's the book of his life. Says the Ben Yoyada, the Gemara over here is talking about a special Sefer HaZichronot. It's the Sefer HaZichronot of Klal Yisrael. This is a special book. A Sefer HaZichronot that in it is written all the people that did for others in Klal Yisrael. And this book is very special. It actually is placed by Kisei HaKavod. And Hashem looks at this book of who did for my children what. Says the Ben Yoyada, when two people are learning together, you don't know what you're doing for the other guy. And you don't know what the other guy is doing for you. You are mamish enhancing the other person. Sefer HaZichronot. Do you know the Meiri writes, Sefer HaZichronot over here means that when two people fight in learning, they get the learning so much better together that they remember the learning much longer. Sefer HaZichronot. What a chidush. Says the Maharsha, you know what the Gemara means over here, Sefer HaZichronot? When two people fight over a sugya together, they enhance each other's sharpness in the sugya that they are able together to bring each other to the emet of the pshat of the sugya. Do you know what you just did for the other guy? You know what the other guy just did for you? He brought you closer to the emet. That's not just a learning. That's a learning of ish el re'ehu. That's a learning that brings out the best in others in Klal Yisrael. That gets you in the book of the Sephirah Zichronot of Klal Yisrael, of helping others, of what you did for the tzibur. And therefore, two people, when they learn together, fire each other up, sharpen each other's svarot, go through the shaklatari together, analyze the sugya together. They are literally borer, the ochel of the psolet of each other's svarot, kushiot, tirutzim. They bring out the best in each other. They're doing such a taiva for the other guy, each one together. Ish el re'ehu vayakshev Hashem. Hashem listens in and says, I want a recording of this. I want to hear this multiple times. Can you get me? Can you get me the audio on that class? I want to hear these two guys again. I want to hear them forever. I want to put them in the Sephirah Zichronot. Let it sit on the arm of Kisar Kavod and let this sit in front of me at all times. That's only shaykh when two people are enhancing each other's learning. But one person, says the Gemara, even though yes, you are learning Torah and what you're learning goes into the book of your life, it does. But you did enhance somebody else in the process. And therefore the Sephirah Zichronot of Klal Yisrael, that one person's learning does not make it into. This is the Torah Hashem wants. He wants the Bechukotai telecho, the Torah with yirat shamayim, the Torah with love, the Torah with achdut, the az nidberu yireh Hashem, ish el re'ehu, then vayakshev Hashem. That's what Hashem wants to hear. That's what Hashem waits for. Rashi says, mamtinim lahem, that Hashem waits for these two guys to come together to learn. He has such a pleasure from their learning. He records their learning, the Sephirah Zichronot of Klal Yisrael, and he holds it by him, and he goes it over, and hangs on to it. Wow, the next time you're going to sit with a chavrusa, well, it's going to be a different experience. It's going to be different. It has to be a different experience. You guys are going to light each other up on fire, draw down a shekhinah, and Borei Olam is going to be part of the chavrusa shaf. You didn't see that one coming. Shh. That's the Torah that Hashem wants to be remembered. Sephirah Zichronot. But if you don't have that Torah, if it's not Ishel Re'ehu, if it's a Torah Shelo Nahagu Kavod Zelazeh, says Borei Olam, I don't want to remember that. That's a Torah that has no kiyum. That's a Torah that doesn't go on. That's a Torah with no Sephirah Zichronot. And hence the 12,000 Tamidimarabiyaki Akiva was Zugot. There wasn't an Ishel Re'ehu. Shelo Nahagu Kavod Zelazeh. That's not a Torah that Hashem says Vayakshev Hashem. That doesn't make it into the book of Sephirah Zichronot. There's no kiyum to that. There's no zikaron to that. I'm going to erase that Torah, that there should not be a memory from that Torah, because that's not the way Torah was meant to be. Fire. This is fire. You're looking at the Ish HaTorah, Rabotai, in the face. You got to hit it. Listen to this Tosafot. Tosafot on the page, Davav. What does Tosafot say when one person learns Torah or two people? One person that learns Torah. His Torah does not go into the book of memory. Says Tosafot, Klomar im acherim. Because there's no one else that he's helping. There's no other guy. There's no chavrusa. He's learning alone. Says Tosafot. Yeah, in the book of his own life, yeah, that Torah of one guy will be written. But if you want to get into the Sephirah Zichronot of Klal Yisrael, that your Torah should have kiyum, that your Torah should be remembered constantly in front of Kisei Kavod, you have to have an Ish El Re'ehu. You have to have Yirat Shamayim to hear out the other guy, to learn with him, not to learn at him. That there should be Torah Beinehem, says Reb Chaim Volozhiner. Otherwise, says Borei Olam, I don't want that Torah to be remembered. Lehefech, I'll take measures that it'll be forgotten quickly. so many years, I watched guys in yeshiva, and many of them were brilliant, brilliant. They were born, they were born with brilliant Jewish minds, brilliant. And nothing came out of those guys. And then I've seen other guys who weren't as brilliant. But their midot and the Yirat Shamayim was much more refined. And they became Magidei Shiurim. And they became Rabbanim. And they became Rosh Kolel. Whereas the big heads, the big giants, the guys that were the best in the class in high school, that everyone expected, this guy is Vadai, a budding Rosh Yeshiva. And later on, don't get me wrong, he became great stuff. He became Ben Torah, a doctor, a lawyer, and this, and he's great. But Klei Kodesh he didn't stay in. Because if you want to make it in Torah, you have to have a Torah that should have kiyum, that should be placed in the Sephirah Zichronot. It's a Torah for Klal Yisrael. It's a personality that has midot, yirat shamayim, az nidbiru, yir'ei Hashem. But as long as this guy's using his Torah to uplift himself and put down others and stoltz out the other guy, because, you heard the kasha and shit today. Yes, you are smarter. You're far more intellectual. But let's see at the end, who is going to stay in learning? Sorry for talking this way. I'm sorry. I've seen it too many times over the years. I'm thinking back now to my days in yeshiva, all the big heads that the rebbe taught. This guy is Rosh Yeshiva, Magid Shiv, where I bump into him 30 years later in weddings. I'm telling you where they are and where they're not. And then there was the simple guys, the Pashat heads that just worked harder. But they had midot, they had yirat shamayim, they had isha re'ehu, they loved other guys, they heard out other guys. When they sat down with Torah beinehem, they worked out a sugya together. Ki ish echad, belev echad. There was the vayakshev Hashem, and they went into the Sephirah Zichronot. Torah mirat shamayim, Torah chesed. Yadua, there's a incredible Gemara, Masechet Berachot, that tells us that Rabbi, with a hey, brought up two young boys in his house. One was his son and the other was his nephew. Later on, to be the legendary Abaye V'Rava. If he didn't go to the kever of Abaye V'Rava in Israel, you didn't see what Israel has to offer yet. Chaparine. You go down into a cave, in the back of the cave, Abaye V'Rava, they are literally buried head to head, as if they're still kachsachin and learning, as if they're still talking over the sugya. You walk down there and you scream, Yiyu Shloi Kani! Abaye V'Rava, two young boys in the house of Rabbi. And one day Rabbi turns to these two young boys, young, and he says to them, where is Hashem? One boy points up to the ceiling of the house. The other boy goes outside and he points up to the sky. Says, Rabbi, oh! Now I see what's going to become of the two of you. What does that mean? Wow, what a Gemara. What's that talking about? They both became giants. They both became Abaye V'Rava. Giants. I want to tell you, listen to this. I heard this magnificent shot from Reb Shlomo Levenstein. And this is really going to put into perspective what we're talking about tonight. The Gemara tells us that Rabbi lived till the age of 40. But Abaye lived till the age of 60. Says the Gemara, why? What was the difference between them? Says the Gemara, because Rabbi learned Torah and Abaye learned Torah ugmilut chasadim. Therefore, Rabbi lived till 40, Abaye lived till 60. Come on, guys. Could you take that Gemara by face value? You mean to tell me that Rabbi did not do gemilut chasadim? Come on! What kind of? You can't say that. You can't learn it that way. You cannot take this Gemara al pi pashtut. So what does it mean? Abaye learned Torah, gemilut chasadim. He lived an extra 20 years because of the gemilut chasadim. Whereas Rabbi only learned Torah. He didn't do gemilut chasadim. Rabbi, gadol ador. Pause for dramatic effect. What's the pshat? Says Rav Shlomo Levenstein, and he brings it from Ma'amarei Chazal, beautiful pshat. He says it doesn't mean that Rabbi learned Torah and Abaye did Torah and Gemilut Chasadim. That's not what it means. It means that Rabbi learned Torah, but Abaye not only learned Torah, but he did Gemilut Chasadim with his Torah. What's the difference? Rabbi was the Rosh Yeshiva. He sat in the yeshiva and waited for the Talmudim to come to him. And he taught whoever came under his roof. Abaye did not sit in yeshiva and wait for them to come to him. Abaye, says the Gemara, he went out. And there are many supporting Gemarot. Abaye, how many Gemarot we had with Abaye on the road? Many. The famous sugi over there of Yichud and Kedushin, Abaye was on the road. And there were, the whole Maisa there. Abaye was always on the road. What's pshat? Abaye was going always out to other cities. He went out to places where there was no Torah to teach them Torah. He not only taught Torah and learned Torah, he did Gemilut Chasadim with his Torah. He went out to those who didn't have, and he went and gave them Torah as well. Torah and Gemilut Chasadim. And because with his Torah he did Gemilut Chasadim, he merited extra years. And this, says Rav Shlomo Levenstein, is the brilliance behind the Gemara we opened with. Two young boys, Abaye and Rava. Rabbi turns to them and says, where's Hashem? One points up to the ceiling. The other one goes outside and points up to the sky. Says Rav Shlomo Levenstein, Rava stayed in the house and pointed up to the ceiling to explain that to him Hashem is here inside. He's the Rosh Yeshiva. He's going to teach Torah here. And when they come to him, he's going to be Marbitz Torah as they enter the indoors of his sanctity. But Abaye went outside. And he pointed up to the sky. I want to show that Hashem is not only indoors. I want to go out and show Hashem is everywhere. Even in the places that are Chaser Torah. I'm going to go out and bring it to them. Torah with Gemilut Chasadim. And because of that, that was a Gavaldige Torah, earned them an extra 20 years. This is Torah Mirat Shamayim. Torah Gemilut Chasadim. Torah Ish El Re'ehu. Im Bechukotai Telechu. That's where all the berachot of this week's parasha resonates. Shh. And that's the Sephirah Secret. That when you go out to teach Klal Yisrael, and others that might not be on your level, and others that are thirsty and they want to learn, and you makarev him to Torah, and you give a isharei or maybe a chavruta that's not as good as you, but you don't nix him, but Adaraba, you machazik him and give him a good zman and uplift him. That is az nidbiru yireh Hashem ish el re'ehu. That's the Torah that Hashem listens to. Vayakshev Hashem. That's Torah Gemilut Chasadim. That's the Torah that makes it to the Sephirah Zichronot, says the Ben Yoyada of Klal Yisrael. That has kiyum. That has kiyum. I think about for a minute Abraham Avinu. Chazal tells us he has 600 Masechtot. Why don't we have 600 Masechtot? Because Abraham Avinu could have been a Rosh Yeshiva. Abraham Avinu could have sat and waited for everybody to come. And instead he was ivri. He went out to the whole Welt. And he spread the Shem Hashem and Torah to the world. Because you did Gemilut Chasadim with my kids, I'm going to do Gemilut Chasadim with your Torah. I'm going to give you more Torah than anybody else. He got 600 Masechtot. Why? Ivri. Ishare'ehu. Az nidbiru yirei Hashem. That's a Torah that has kiyum. That's Vayakshev Hashem. Wow. Wow. Let me see if I have time to close this. Maybe we could say one more magnificent, mind-blowing idea when it comes to the Tamidimarabiyaki Akiva. And maybe another mahalach of what it was that they were missing, that there was a taina on them, that they were taken from this world. Shelo nahagu kavod ze lazeh. Gentlemen, ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. What do those words mean? I want to tell you something. Most people you ask that question to, they're going to say the famous Gemara of Rava. Man, I'll tell it to you in English, don't do to someone else what you don't want someone else to do to you. And yes, that could be a pshat of ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. But that's not the words. Those are not the words. The words don't tell you what not to do to someone else. The words tell you what to do to someone else. To love someone else the way you want to be loved. To give love to someone else the way you want to be loved. Says Chazal, if you want a pair of shoes, go out and get everybody a pair of shoes. If you want a suit, go out and get everybody a suit. The love that you want to experience, show to everyone else as well. But it's impossible. How am I going to do that? Every time I want to buy a pair of shoes, I got to go knocking on doors. What size are you? What size are you? What size are you? How's that possible? It's davar she'ef shalikayem. So it can't be that that's what the Torah meant, says Chazal, to that extent. But there's one person that you actually can do the literal pshat of ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. The one person in this world that actually halachically has a din as you. And that is your wife. Ishto kigufo. And if you want to show a certain love to yourself, make sure that the love that you want to have, you show to others as well. Dahainu, your wife. The way you want to be loved is the way you love her. You want to be mefanek yourself, you better be mefanek her. You want a new suit for Yom Tov, you make sure that she gets a new dress. You want new shoes for the holiday, make sure she gets a closet worth of shoes. Okay? But the way you want the love is the way you have to experience the love for her. She is the only person that be'etzem has a din like you. And therefore the way you want to be loved, you have to treat her in same exact in vein. Same vein. The love for you is the love for her. Lo pachot. Yoter maybe, but lo pachot. She is the only one that you can be mekayim, the literal meaning of ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. And if this is the case, maybe this is why the Talmudim of Rabbi Akiva were nichshal in ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Although it was the memra, it was the teaching of their rabbi. It's the last teaching you would expect them to be nichshal in. But yet, they were nichshal ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. You know why? Because the true literal ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha is through someone's wife. And they were learning by a rebbe for 24 years that was away from his wife. They didn't see it by the rebbe. And therefore they didn't fashtei the literal understanding of ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. They understood ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Don't do to the other guy what you don't want to be done either. But to show love to someone the way you want to be loved, the only manifestation is a wife. And they were learning by the rebbe that was away from his wife. They didn't see it. V'hayu enecha ro'ot you got to see the way the Rebbe walks. You got to see the way the Rebbe talks. You got to see the way the Rebbe handles. You got to see the way the Rebbe eats. And you got to see the way the Rebbe interacts. And they didn't see it. And because of that, says the Gemara, they were 12,000 zugot. They were nichshal in the zug. Reb Cheskel. They were nichshal in the zug. The true ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, because they didn't have a rebbe, and on our rebbe, nothing goes. For that, they didn't have a rebbe. And Rabbi Akiva tried to fix this. When finally Rabbi Akiva comes back with 24,000 Talmudim, and they didn't want to let Rachel through. Rabbi Akiva said, "What do you mean? Sheli v'shelachem shelahi. Didn't you fashtei? Didn't you get it? Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha is not just not to do to someone else what you don't want to be done to you, but to love someone the way you want to be loved. The reason why I was able to teach you for 24 years is because of her love. Everything I had was hers. Everything that she has is mine. Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. You didn't get that? And if you didn't get that, you didn't get the real Clarkite in the ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. And therefore, lo nagu kavod ze baze. It doesn't say ze laze. Ze baze is a person in himself. There's only one person that is a din of you, and that is your wife. Your wife. Ishto ki gufo. Lo nagu kavod ze baze, says the Gemara. 12,000 zugot. They were nichshal in the zug. Because by the Rebbe, they didn't see the zug. A wife will make you or break you. I am sitting here 20 years later with a kehila of amazing guys, and I am telling you, with all the musar, with all the shiur, and all the rashot, the guys that married Yireh Shamayim, great girls, they became great. And the ones that the wives were chaser, oy, what a battle. What a battle, what a battle. You're fighting City Hall. You're fighting City Hall. What a battle, what a battle. And I could tell you who became B'nai Torah, and I could tell you who's still struggling. And it had a lot to do with the wives. A lot to do with the wives. My father once told me that one of the greats, I don't want to say the name for obvious reasons, but he told my father growing up in the Mir Yeshiva, he said, where are all the altamira? Hundreds came from Shanghai. They were all Yodea, Shasu, Poskim. We should have had hundreds of the Rosh Yeshivas. Where are they? You know what he told them? He says, when they came to America, there were no girls that were frum to marry. What the Nazis couldn't do, what they went through Shanghai, they come to America, and there were no frum girls to marry. I could never say that, and I would never have the chutzpah to say that. This is what a very prominent giant told my father. When my father asked, where are all the altamiras? They all came to America. They're all Gidolei Torah. Where are they? Everyone should have a yeshiva of his own. There should be 100 Mir yeshivas. There should be 100 Beis HaTalmids. There should be where is all the altamira? And they all came over at an older age. And at that time, after the war, there wasn't frum girls enough for them to marry. And where are they today? Amazing. Sheli v'shelachem shelahi ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, when he came home, it was known that before he walked in the door of his house, he straightened his frock, his rekel, he straightened his hat. Talmudim said, Rebbe, when he says, I'm going in to greet my wife, I'm going in to greet the Shekhinah. That's a gadol. Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. The Steipler Gaon. A guy came to him with a long list of all the hours of Zdarim that he's going to do now that he's married. He had everything on that list. Chumash and Radad and Rambam and Mishnah, and he's going to finish Kol HaTorah Kula in 3 days. You know those guys? He has a list where, mommy, he's on a high, he's going to finish everything. The Steipler says, wow, but you're missing something on your list. He says, I'm missing something. Wow, he's looking. No, what do you mean? I have the Ksais, I have Reb Chaim. What am I missing? He says, you're missing something. Where on your list does it show a few minutes for your wife? Without that, your Torah is not going to be Mekuyim. You're not going to get into the Sephirah Zichronot. Can't be. Your Torah can't be on the cheshbon of somebody else's pain. It has to be with her support. It has to be with her love. It has to be the way you want it is the way you give it to her as well. And maybe that's the pshat that the great Arizal HaKadosh tells us, that before you start davening in the morning, right before Akedat Yitzchak, when you say to L'Shem Yichud to start your Shachrit prayer, you're supposed to say, Hareini mikabel al atzmi, the great mitzvah of Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, V'ani ohev et kol echad ve'echad b'nei Yisrael kenafshi u'ma'odi, V'hareini mizamen et peh sheli, litpalel. Wow. You mean to tell me V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha is connected to tefillah? Yeah, because Vayakshev Hashem. If you're not ready to hear out somebody else, Hashem's not ready to hear you out neither. So says Reb Chaim Volozhiner. You're starting to daven, you want to be heard? Be a mensch that hears others. Have Ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Have that unbelievable love to show the wife the way you want to be treated. Treat her. Like my rebbe once told me, you want to be a king? Make sure your wife is a queen. That's the only way you're going to become a king. It's not going to come with demands. It's not going to come with my way or the highway. It's going to come with, she becomes a queen, automatically you're a king of your home. And that, in my opinion, you go to visit the kever of the Arizal HaKadosh, After you come out of the mikveh and you're shaking, and you were zeicher to mamish the promise of tshuva gemura, and you come back to the Arizal's kever, and you daven and you mishtateach al kivro, on the one that told us what? Before you daven. Look at the side of the kever. It says there the 10 things that are written that the Arizal taught over the many things of Klal Yisrael. The first thing the Arizal taught, look at the side of the kever, you know what the next thing was, number 2? That the Arizal was mechabed et ishto yoter min atzmo. That's what it says. He was mechabed his wife more than he was mechabed himself. You know why? Because number 1 was v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. And therefore memela, number 2 is, the literal translation is, your wife. Don't be nichshal in the zugot like the 12,000 zugot. And you know what number 3 was? Shari Arizal Haya Koneh used to buy for his wife Tachshitim Naim, beautiful dresses, beautiful gowns for holidays, for Shabbat, even more from the money that he had. He couldn't afford it. He spent more than what he had on her to be able to show her the love that anyone would want. These are the days v'aftal re'acha kamocha. No wonder they lead up to the great wedding of the night of Shavuot, because without the zug, v'azoi can we come to the chasana. Thank you for listening.